Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L getting back into the swing of things with anime reviews. Whoa! Anyway, we're here to talk about 86. As it turns out, one of the better anime from the season. Let me tell you, I am so happy that the commenters told me about this one because I would have missed it altogether. 86 is a sci-fi anime. If you don't know, essentially it's a pretty dark sci-fi. It's a pretty dark war story. Usually, when it comes to light novels, the sci-fi ones are kind of hit and miss when it comes to adaptations, not the light novels themselves. And that's just because sci-fi is such a dense material in general that usually an anime can't really replicate the feeling of a sci-fi novel. So it's actually really cool. What I've seen here for the first 3 episodes, I've really enjoyed. I think it's been a solid. Obviously, it's almost guaranteed that there have been things that have been skipped. It's going to probably be character stuff or maybe information on the devices that people are using. Otherwise, it's been pretty good for the anime experience. It is legitimately, I think, one of the better shows for the season. You know, I'm not great at explaining the premise, so I'm just going to give you the synopsis. The Republic of San Magnolia, for a long time, the country has been besieged by their neighbor, the Gadian Empire, or Giadan Empire, which created a series of unmanned drones called the Legion. After years of painstaking research, the Republic finally developed autonomous drones of their own, turning the one-sided struggle into a war without casualties. Or at least that's what the government claims. In truth, there is no such thing as a bloodless war. Beyond the fortified walls protecting the 85 Republic territories lies the non-existent 86 sector. The young men and women of this forsaken land are branded 86 and stripped of their humanity and pilot the unmanned weapons into battle. So just that part there about stripped of their humanity is pretty much one of the big things that you see here. This is a show about a society that dehumanized other people based on really arbitrary things such as hair color and eye color. Shin directs the actions of a detachment of young 86ers while on battlefield. Lena is a handler who commands a detachment from the remote rear with the help of special communication. The farewell story of the severe, sad struggle of these two begin. Oh, farewell story of the... Okay, anyway, that's the explanation for the anime. Obviously, you're watching this, you probably already know what the anime is about. But other things that were missed here, in case you haven't watched, is specifically that Lena is from the inner sanctum, the inner world, the 85 Magnolia, whatever it was called. And she is presented as one of the nicest people in that group. And she's trying to bridge the divide between the two, and she is trying to do her best working within the system as best as she can to help the 86. That's something that the synopsis kind of misses here. She is actually a very good girl. She is like the very nice girl. That's why she has so much building in the episode. Anyway, that's the general introduction. Apologies for botching that, but we're going in 3 episodes. So overall, I think this is really solid. Overall, I think the 3 episodes that we've gotten so far, tomorrow we get the other episode, have done really well in terms of introducing the characters and introducing central conflicts. So just go very quickly. I'm going to be focusing more on episode 3, but episode 1 is the solid introduction to the 86 proper and to Lena's character. With episode 1, you do get hints that there is legitimately something strange going on with Shin. As we know, the gimmick with Shin is that he ruins his handlers. So pretty much the people like Lena who are in her position, he ruins them, destroys them. One guy suicided. We don't know how he does it, but there might be some kind of paranormal aspect going on in here, or there might be some kind of weird thing. Episode 1 has some strange moments. And even the way that everyone talks about people who are passing, like were they able to pass and all that, it does kind of like make you wonder. And one of the episodes also speaks specifically about preventing information overload because of some of the sense sharing that's going on between the handler and the people. So for those that don't know, Lena is able to keep an eye on things by hooking into a system. She's able to speak directly to her group. She is able to see where they're going on a map, and there's specifically somewhere dialogue about why they don't share like visual data. And I believe that there were at some point brain scans, but I might be a little bit wrong on that one. It's been a while since I watched the first episode. But yeah, no, there's enough information here to think that one of the characters in Shin's group, or Shin himself, most likely Shin himself, is able to somehow information overload the handler. And if he himself is getting information that's extrasensory in nature, then that kind of makes sense as to how the information overload is happening. One thing you also notice, especially with episode 3, is that the kids are caught in a conflict specifically about wanting to hurt Lena and not wanting to hurt Lena, where Shin himself isn't necessarily in the mind that he wants to ruin all the handlers. I'm not sure if you can kind of get that, but there's a lot of things going into it. And of course, if you're watching these videos, I assume you've already watched the 3 episodes as well. The reason I'm bringing that part up is just because it's interesting to bring up the various motivations, because episode 3 does make a point of saying that yes, some people here do want to hurt Lena and what Lena represents, very understandably, but at the same time there is the nuance that the people who are wanting that aren't in the right, especially because in this particular situation Shin is the one who's presented as the direction. He's the one that's presented as the moral compass. Everyone else is relative to Shin. Like whatever Shin is doing is probably the correct way within that little social circle, and that is confirmed when the characters defer to Shin's judgment. And I believe it was episode 3 where someone was telling the redhead girl to just take it easy, because destroying the handlers isn't what necessarily Shin wants, which is important to have the nuance there. Anyway, yeah, episode 1 was the introduction to Shin proper. Episode 2 was a stronger showing for Lena because Lena was doing things. And then episode 3 is pretty much a consequence episode, and like where the reality hits. Episode 3 is by far the more interesting one because in episode 3 we have a significant death. And we also have some other little things going on in the background. One thing to keep in mind with 86 is that they do play around with the timeline a little bit. Like episode 3 started with the end of the episode 3, and then you kind of worked up towards the end. The problem with this thing as well is that there's so many characters, it's kind of hard to remember. Like when I went into episode 3, I forgot that first 10 seconds, which really didn't change anything for me at all in terms of the episode. I completely forgot it. So in terms of like maybe direction, maybe the time jumping doesn't always work, because again, you know, if you miss the first 10 seconds of episode 3, does it really matter in the long run? Because also the thing is, like, it's a foregone conclusion. Like what episode 3 is trying to do is that, hey, look, someone died. Well, who could that be? But it's like we're only 3 episodes in, and then episode 3 had to set up, well, you know, this is why you should care about her. But even then, because you know what type of series it is, that beginning scene really isn't needed. And the fact that I could forget about it so easily and still probably come out of the episode feeling the same way regardless, I think that's just, you know, that's probably one of the challenges here. The timeline's shifting is there to make things a little bit more interesting, but I don't think it works all the time. There was one segment in episode 3 that I did think worked really well, when they had the kids or the 86ers talking on their side with Handler or Lena, and then later in the episode you had it from Lena's perspective. And the really interesting thing there was with the way they showed it. You know, on the 86 side, you see how much of a family these people are. You see how together they are. You also see how much they're struggling in their little environment. When you go to Lena, well, you see the opposite. Lena's all by herself, but she's in a really pretty environment, and you can see that these are the people that she's connecting to. So what was interesting about those two scenes is that you have a contrast. You have these people in a miserable shit situation, but they have each other. Whereas with Lena, you have her by herself in a posh situation, but she's still by herself, which is actually really good to symbolize what exactly these characters have. And this leads me into like some of the more interesting things about episode 3, coming off of episode 2 in particular. So what episode 3 did at the end, right? It was all about reality setting in for Lena. Like, she apologized for the one girl getting killed because of an oversight with maps or whatever. And then she gets berated about how cushy her life is, how she's not really there. And you know what? The points stand, right? The points totally stand. It totally makes sense why the kid would berate her. And when he berates her, it's not like he's technically wrong, right? Totally worthwhile. His points are valid. He has a right to be angry on all that kind of stuff. What I found more interesting, however, was the comments and the reactions to that whole situation, with people cheering on Lena being put down in her place. It was interesting to see people saying like, yeah, she actually isn't really helping, or like, you know, what good is she doing? She's not really there. And it's just so interesting because people so quickly forget the situation that Lena is in, and people so quickly forget episode 2, because when you look at Lena's situation, And this is probably something that's going to be brought up because Shin himself has been set up to be much more nuanced than the rest of his team here, because again, everyone revolves around Shin. Lena is in an insanely scary situation. I'm surprised she makes it to episode 3 alive. And this is like the important thing, especially in this particular anime that is a criticism specifically on war and the nature of people on the safe side and the nature of people on the actual battlefield. You got to be really careful criticizing Lena, because you're going to be very, like, odds are, if you're criticizing Lena for the way she lives her life, you're very likely going to be criticizing yourself depending on whether or not you live in the Western world. Because Lena's situation is a parallel to the Western world looking over at conflict zones. And this is just talking in general to my viewer here. Lena's in a society where she's trying to do the best with what she's given. And in episode 3, they point out, well, Lena never asked them for their names. And that's a really good point. But at the same time, I also don't care too much about their names. I know Shin, but I don't know anyone else because their names are really hard to remember. Their call signs are much easier. And from Lena's perspective, Shin introduced himself as Undertaker. Like, that's how she associates to him, and that's just a reinforcement. What I'm saying there is, like, you know, they brought up that point, which is a really good point, because he didn't really think to have the human connection. But at the same time, you can't really... It's very unfair to criticize someone for not having the luxury of experience. Lena knows nothing about the world. She's going in this from her perspective. How can you criticize someone who legitimately doesn't know how to think? That's what makes the comments so interesting when you're seeing it on the forums. Criticizing Lena is essentially the same as criticizing people in the West who look onto conflict from afar. That's why you gotta be very careful for it, because what Lena does is she's doing a lot more than what most likely the typical anime viewer does. And when I say typical anime viewer, I am thinking of a very particular type that I don't think watches YouTube videos. That said, I do want to pose to you, do you not think that Lena is in danger? And this is where things get interesting. She's being berated for not being part of the situation and in a way not doing enough. And then when you go into the comments, well, some of the louder ones are also berating her. They're jumping in on the dog pile. But if you go to episode 2, remember what happens in episode 2. Lena goes up in front of a classroom of her next generation of soldiers. And I have a scene here. Quite literally, the teacher is right next to her. He's covering his ears. There's a military police officer in that room. And Lena walks down in there and she tells them, hey, this is propaganda. And this is the thing. This is absolutely dangerous. If we want to go to the obvious parallels, we know how bad it was to be someone on the inside of a particular party from World War II and be helping people from the inside without getting caught. What Lena is doing, I'm surprised she hasn't been assassinated, right? Because she's going directly against the propaganda. The military police got up. The teacher is scared. Those kids are indoctrinated. And Lena went in there and she talked. And you might think, well, that's not as dangerous as being on the battlefield. But like, nah, man. It's usually your own people that... Think about how hard things have been usually when someone's trying to fight within the society that's doing a wrong to make a change. This isn't an issue of people from outside the society trying to change the society. This is changing society from within. We know how dangerous this is for everyone. We know how bad this is for political dissidents. Our world, we've seen many situations where people critical of a regime that they escape end up ultimately falling by the hands of that regime later on. We have very high profile cases. Lena right now is being protected most likely by Cloud. Like, she's being protected by that one guy that was in episode 1 that's like the commanding officer or whatever. And that's the big thing. What Lena is doing, yeah, she may not be able to help them directly, but let's think about the circumstances here. We're being told that this war is going to be over in 2 years, and then the 86 are going to be welcomed back in as citizens. You think that's true? The 86 have been turned into less than human. They're being called processors, as in CPUs. They're being called essentially the brain of a computer, which is what they are. They're the brains of that device. They're the CPU of that device. That's why they're being called processors. They've been dehumanized so much. Can you really imagine a society that doesn't even know of their existence at whole, welcoming them back with open arms? No, like you actually do legitimately need Lena as an activist on the inside trying to change perspective, because right now, with 2 years from the end of this war, apparently, the history teacher is still there. He's still blocking out his ears. This is why Lena is important. Lena is in a very precarious place because she's the one most likely to be killed in her sleep, and not by some kind of foreign danger that people are calling AI or whatever. Which, the AI robots, it's also built on assumptions. But yeah, no. Episode 2 establishes that Lena did something very critical, and what Lena did in episode 2 is absolutely critical for the 86 in general. Because if she can't change public opinion, what is to stop the 85 colonies or whatever they're called from nuking the 86 when they're done? What's to stop them from setting off self-destruct devices in their robots when the fight's over, right at the last day? What stops them from doing that? Nothing, right? When you look at it, the 85 live happy lives on the backs of the 86. If they want to keep their indulgent lives, they're going to keep a situation where they can exert power on the lower people. That's not going to change even if the war ends. That's why ultimately, you can berate Lena for not being there with the 86 proper, but Lena's actions are significantly more impactful for their future. And mind you, there is another significant difference here. The 86 go into their thing knowing full well that they might die, right? Lena is doing things very naively, very ignorant. Not only is she naive about the situation with 86 and their relationship, their working relationship, she's also very naive about how kind her society is. She's been treating really well. You have to really hope that whoever is protecting her continues to protect her, because otherwise this girl's in trouble. But overall, this is what makes the series pretty cool, right? Is that we can talk about this. That we can look at episode 2 and we can talk about episode 2. We can see the reactions from episode 3 and point out, well, actually, really, when it comes to episode 3, I really do legitimately think that the Lena hate is an issue of agreeing with the last thing that was said. Because again, when you look at episode 2, this is an absolutely terrifying situation. I'm more terrified for people in a developed society when they're speaking out against a government than I am for actual combatants. Because in my mind, combatants are going to die. But the people in the society are going to get assassinated, which is significantly more insidious, right? Mind you, we're talking about brutality. The rule's very brutal. But there's one situation there that makes you lose faith in humanity. And it's specifically when your brothers are taking you down because they don't want you to change the status quo for the better. That's significantly more insidious. And chances are, if we're going to the future without reading the novel here, Lena, episode 2 has to have a penalty for Lena, which is going to be really rough because she's going to be taking it from both ends. She's going to be taking it from the 86, and she's going to be taking it from people that look like her. And she's going to get a real nice reality check if she hasn't gotten the reality check already. But that's why episode 4 is going to be very interesting. We still have to see exactly how Shin's going to break her as well. But maybe that's going to come relatively soon. I've seen the covers for the next couple of volumes as well, and they seem pretty cool. It seems like things will be all right at some point, but we're probably going to see a lot of death, and that's worth keeping in mind. But overall, when it comes to 86, I think if I was to rate it, I think first off, high tier series. I would say super high tier series. I think it's the kind of series that you could watch, and it rewards paying attention. So if you're the kind of viewer that likes paying attention, I think high tier series respects the viewer, is very interesting to talk about because of the way that characters are shown be wrong and be correct, right? The series isn't afraid to say who is wrong or who is in the wrong and who is in the right or who is closer to the right. So that's pretty cool. The characters, well, the main two characters, Lena and Shin, make sense enough. Shin's quieter, but everyone else describes him, so you have a pretty good sense of him. The world makes sense. You understand where we're coming in here. There's enough plot points that you look and you're like, so everything here looks by design. Doesn't look like there's anything done here by accident. It looks like the story is well cared for, and little details don't go the wayside. Overall, I guess if I was to give it a weakness, I think I'm gonna end up giving it high tier 9 out of 10 for the first 3 episodes, but I will take a point away specifically because I'm not even gonna care about the animation or drawings. Like they got a little bit of smudge facing going on, but that's normal. I would take away a point just because of their framing devices, specifically with the timeline jumping. If you pay attention to the timeline, you'll understand the extra meaning, but some of the timeline shenanigans are highly unnecessary. Don't think we need that. That's why I would take a point away from it. But otherwise, everything is expressed clearly, which is really good. Would this be a show for casuals? Yes. Because there's such a strong human element that it would be easy to jump on the casuals. Another issue, well, one particular issue that I could see coming up here though, is that people are gonna make inferences based on subtitles, and in this particular case, with this show, you might have to be careful because I think some of the nuance of the Japanese might be lost, and I think in a show where it's specifically going to be referencing what people have said before, and you're going to be using that to make character judgments, you have to be very careful. So this is an English exclusive thing. The dialogue in this show is going to be super important, and I don't think the subtitles are going to catch all the nuance, and I think that's going to lead to maybe some incorrect inferences. One inference I saw was that Lena wasn't paying attention to the thing that they said about the cats, and like she's doodling as she's hearing it, which is showing that she's really listening to them. But the comment had criticized Lena for not listening to the fact that they only had one cat. But like legitimately, if you think about this again from the perspective of a regular person, if you're in a household of 6 people and they all have a cat, do you expect those 6 people to have 10 different names for the cat? No, right? It's not an issue of Lena wasn't listening. It's an issue of Lena doesn't understand what perspective they're coming from, which paints that's a completely different inference. So that's why you have to be really careful with the subtitles, because like while one person could say that Lena wasn't listening to what they were saying about the cat, I could say like Lena was legitimately confused because she had no reason to believe why they would have 6 different names for the same cat. Like she could have just very well have assumed that they had a cat from before they got the first cat, because they also mentioned they have something called Fido, or like whatever their robot dog pet is. But it's things like that. Another point quite easily is like when they bring up that Lena doesn't know their names or hasn't referred to them as their names. Shin introduces himself as Undertaker. That's the first thing he introduces himself, Lena, as. She might not have thought that they cared that much about the names, and it's again another issue of Lena doesn't know any better, and you chastise a child for not knowing any better. No, not really. You can only reprimand them when they do wrong and then hope that they learn the second time, right? But it's little things like that. I wouldn't take away any points for the delicateness of language, because this is just one of the unfortunate realities of the situation. I suspect it would be clearer in the light novel though, because the light novel can over-explain something, whereas the anime really can't. So the light novel could fix that. But yeah, overall, solid, man. I'm in. I'm gonna keep watching, and I'm really thankful that the commenters, I'm pretty sure it was Miguel that told me about this one. Told me about the anime in general. So guys, that's my thoughts. This was the first 3 episodes impression review video. I hope you enjoyed, and till next time, I hope you have an absolute great day. Stay safe, and don't get COVID.